Have you ever held a crayon and looked at it closely? Do you wonder how it was made? Well, it turns out crayons are made of a special type of wax, along with different colored pigments. In fact, both crayons and candles use wax to hold their shapes. Crayons wouldn't be nearly as fun without their colorful, waxy insides. So, let's explore how this magical material is made. To begin making crayons, you need two important things: wax and pigments. But first, what is wax? Wax is a material made of tiny molecules that are squeezed together very tightly. These molecules are also called lipids. They are similar to fats and oils, but their molecules are more densely packed, which makes them hard at room temperature. This special material is then heated up and melted, so that it can later take the shape of a candle or crayon. But what about pigments? Pigments are materials that can absorb certain wavelengths of light while reflecting others. This gives them a color. For example, the pigment in green crayons absorbs red and blue light, but reflects green light, which is why they look green. Now, these two ingredients are combined and stirred together, and this mixture is what's used to make crayons. Now, there are many different types of waxes and pigments that can be used to make crayons. Sometimes soy wax is used because it's natural and smells good. Other times beeswax is used because it has a strong pigment. In this video, we'll talk about how paraffin, wax and pigment are used to make crayons. First, the wax and pigment are mixed together in a big metal container. This container looks like a big cooking pot, except it's much bigger than any pot you might have at home. This container is then put over a heating element that heats the wax until it melts. This melting process takes a long time, but it's worth it because the next step is the most exciting. You may know that when you stir together lots of different liquids, they mix together, but sometimes they don't mix well. This is called a homogeneous mixture. A homogeneous mixture is uniform or homogeneous throughout. However, if two liquids don't mix, they form a heterogeneous mixture. A heterogeneous mixture isn't uniform or homogeneous throughout. You've probably seen a heterogeneous mixture before, like when you mix oil and water together. Oil and water are two liquids that don't mix. Instead, they form two separate layers. When you pour oil and water together, the oil floats on top of the water and they just sort of sit there. But mixing wax and pigment is a lot like mixing salt and water. Salt and water are two things that do mix well and form a homogeneous mixture. Salt dissolves in water, which means it's evenly distributed throughout the water. You can't see the salt, but it's definitely there. Similarly, when wax and pigment are mixed together, the wax holds the shape of the crayon, and the pigment gives the crayon its color. Together, they make crayons so colorful and fun to use. If you ask any kid what their favorite color is, chances are they'll say red. Red is a primary color, which means you can't make it by mixing other colors together. But red dye is actually really hard to make. In fact, scientists had to figure out a completely new way to make red dyes. At first, people made red dyes by crushing up plants and using the juices as pigment. But, after a while, they ran out of plants. So they started experimenting with other things. Eventually, they discovered that they could make red dyes using a chemical called naphthalene. Naphthalene is a white substance that's found in coal tar. Coal tar is a thick black liquid that's left over after coal is turned into coke. To make coke, coal is heated up and turned into a lightweight material that's used in steel making. Scientists started boiling naphthalene with sulfuric acid, and this created a bright red sludge. At first, people didn't know what to do with this sludge, but then someone had an idea. Why not try using it as pigment? And that's exactly what they did. They mixed the sludge with wax and made crayons. And that's how we got red crayons. Sometimes crayon manufacturers also add a small amount of stearic acid to the wax. Stearic acid helps the wax harden at cooler temperatures. This makes it easier for crayons to stay in one piece and not bend or melt in your hands. Crayon wax isn't the only thing that gets melted. Did you know that plastic bottles are often recycled into fleece jackets? Yeah, fleece is made by melting plastic bottles and reshaping them into a soft material that is perfect for jackets and blankets. Now that the wax and pigments are all mixed together, it's time to pour them into crayon molds. These molds are made of metal and are shaped like crayons. They have two parts, an upper part and a lower part. First, the upper part of the mold is removed, and then the liquid wax is carefully poured into the bottom part. The liquid wax fills up the mold, and then the upper part is put back on. At this point, the molds are placed somewhere cool so the wax can solidify or turn from a liquid back into a solid. If the molds are made of metal, cold water can be run through pipes inside the molds to cool the wax quickly. If the molds are made of plastic, fans blow cool air onto them to speed up the cooling process. When the wax is solid, it's time to take out the crayons. A machine pushes the crayons out of the molds and they fall onto a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt carries the crayons to the next step in the process. But first, let's think about how crayons got their shapes. When the wax is liquid, it doesn't have any shape. It just sort of takes the shape of whatever container it's in. But once the wax cools, it hardens and keeps its shape. This is called the shape retention property. All crayons have this property, but some objects like ice cubes don't. Ice cubes melt and then evaporate as water vapor. Some crayon manufacturers save the wax that falls off the crayons during this process. They melt down the wax and use it to make more crayons. This saves money and reduces waste. At this stage, the crayons are plain and boring looking. They need to be labeled so kids know what color they are. Machines wrap each crayon in colorful paper. This not only tells kids what color the crayon is, but it also protects the wax from dirt and germs. Now the crayons are ready to be packed into boxes. Some boxes hold 8 crayons, while others hold 24 or more. The crayons are put into the boxes, and then the boxes are sealed up. Finally, the boxes are put onto pallets. Pallets are like big, flat trays that hold many boxes. The pallets are then loaded onto trucks and sent to stores all over the world. So next time you pick up a crayon, remember it started out as liquid wax. It went through a lot of changes before it became the colorful crayon you use to make art. Now that you know how crayons are made, why don't you make a drawing and color it with your favorite crayons? Making crayons is a really interesting process. But it's not the only manufacturing process that involves melting things. In a previous project, we built a machine that made chocolate bars. We melted chocolate and then poured it into molds. After the chocolate hardened, we took it out of the molds and wrapped it in shiny aluminum foil. Now it's time for you to build your own manufacturing line. You can start by melting chocolate or wax and pouring it into molds. Then you can take the finished product out of the molds and decorate it. Get creative and have fun. If you liked learning about crayons, then check out our videos about how pencils are made or how markers are made. We have lots of fun, educational videos that will teach you all about how everyday items are made. Thanks for watching.